Recording.
Sorry.
Ready?
Yeah.
If it is the pleasure of the executive committee, I'm happy to run through since chair and vice chair are not here unless anybody volunteers that they would like to do it instead. All right, if not, I call this meeting to order, 2 o'clock. We'll do a roll call. All of it. Keith Smith, Galloway, Colette Sheehy, here. Greg Powell, he stepped out, he'll be back in a moment. Anthony Harrow,
Here.
Margaret Claire, here. Taylor Fromm. Okay, now open comments for the public. There's nobody in the personal space here over public comment. See anybody online?
Nope.
Okay, next consent agenda. Consent agenda includes the draft minutes from the April 26th meeting, as well as the monthly financial update, the profit and loss statement. Are there any amendments or changes or questions?
Move to accept.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? We have to wait for Mr. Powell to come back in order to actually follow through the vote. For the quorum. Might just want to sit tight because the next one's up.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, we should just hang.
Could I just ask a question about, like, on page 3 of the minutes? Under item 7. When we're down talking about what Ned said. This is not without precedent. He mentioned the regional transit partnership as an example. He noted that the long range transportation plan being a boilerplate for how to plan housing in the jurisdiction.
Being a boilerplate for how to plan transportation.
Oh, yeah, it didn't quite make sense.
Yeah, it should be. I bet it should be transportation.
I think what he was saying is
Or like the idea.
their plan uses transportation.
Right.
You couldn't amend that.
Template or model.
Mainly around constraining. I see.
Right.
Mr. Powell, while you were out, we did the roll call, so you were the only one remaining, you are here. And then there is review of the consent agenda. There's a request for one revision in the notes in the minutes so far. Are there any other revisions or comments? If not, Anthony Harrow moved to accept. I believe Margaret there with the revision. Thank you. There's second. All right, I'll take a vote by affirmation. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. And a abstention. And abstention.
Does that screw things up? We don't have a.
Does we have one? Officer nominations. You want to take that one?
Yeah. So in our last agenda setting meeting with the chair and vice chair, I think both of them proposed to, or at the will of the executive committee, continue in those roles. This kind of can segue into a broader conversation about, I know that I talked to Greg last week about the executive committee's composition itself, but both Keith and Ned, or I guess Chair Galloway and Vice Chair Smith, both would like to serve in another year in their current roles, which even with the bylaws changes that we proposed is still allowed. And so I think that, you know, for continuity's sake, to continue to have folks that are not only available at this time of day and willing to come to the meetings, but also familiar with the strategic planning process that we've done and what we plan to do. So that's, I don't know if we're staff, you know, that's sort of the update that I'm sure that Chair Galloway would echo if he was here.
So Ned and Keith are both willing to serve another year in their current.
Correct.
Yep, Ned as
Correct.
chair, Keith as vice chair.
Do we need a vote?
They just need a vote, but it
Good.
goes to
The full.
the full commission, so it's a vote to recommend that slate to the full RHP. That's right. Any discussion?
Yes. First, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of the short term. I have raised on a number of occasions, it seems to me we've been in existence 4 years now,
Yes, 2019.
that it might be time to start thinking about rotating people in and out of the executive board. I'd offer to be one of those people, and I'm fine to continue until such time as we sort of assess the broader board composition. Well, I'm fine to serve for a year or two for that matter. Or if it's time to start rotating people off, then I can make a suggestion for who in the private sector is valuable on the executive at whatever time. Which could be, I was thinking we were needing to act because July 1st is the next fiscal year, and I thought we had to have all this in place by then, and it's clearly not going to happen. So I'm hoping that the rest of the board is not thinking we've got this little group here that are just stuck in place, and I suppose if there is any feedback like that, then maybe that's the time to say, why you want to step up. But if there's no, my sense is that, you know, with things being busy, that there probably are few, if any, other board members that are looking to find a way to quadruple or involve in this organization. But for what it's worth, I think at some point it's time to start rotating off, and I think my role could be one of those at whatever time we all decide that makes sense.
I think maybe the use of classes would be good, so not everybody fails at the same time.
Yes.
And you have an end point to your assignment, you know, and when you start, you know, when it's gonna end. But I also understand the need at this time for us to keep kind of going for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Because the main part of the strategic plan that we're in right now is to figure out what those things are gonna look like, so I'm willing to hang in there. And I agree with the, you know, like recommending that full membership for that, all right. You know, it's starting to be a little like, is it Poland or something, or Japan, no, it's China, or the leader states and like.
I think they're supposed to be 5 years.
It was in the fall, but it's still.
So,
Yeah. Wait for that.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right.
and
Let's just.
And even after that work, I think your comment is something that I've been thinking about, that we don't also want the executive committee turning over all of the time.
No, absolutely.
And so even once we decide who should be on the full partnership and what roles should be on the executive committee, we then map out terms that overlap with one another. So then,
Yeah, definitely.
And just to, I mean, I know we're still in this, it's tangential but related. But speaking of that grant, so it's been a very slow process basically to hear from Virginia Housing. I heard from them today that we should be receiving our official award letter today or tomorrow, which means that we can actually start working with Amy Niesenson and kind of. I think what we'll have to do now is kind of, you know, the scope that she had sent over was about 8 months, starting at the beginning of April, I believe, you know, because we had applied at the beginning of March. But working with her to kind of consolidate that and figure out sort of the new timeline that we feel is realistic with both available staff capacity and also when the board, I would imagine, you know, the scope that we submitted ended in December, excuse me. And so having something close to that, I think would be great. And it, you know, we could work with her to kind of determine if there are parts we can speed up. Yeah. Which I think is definitely possible, but I want to just, I feel like, I'm sorry, I've been, every meeting said, we're really close to getting it, but that's, I mean, we've been living in this kind of limbo because, you know, there are multiple departments that are involved in granting the official, you know, award letters, but the grant officer told me that I should be hearing from them, which is cool. So anyway, we'll have an idea, you know, we'll probably have Amy at our next executive committee meeting, probably, you know, in person or virtually, just kind of start that process more formally, but yeah, long story short.
So, yeah. So we're going to have some rotation. It's true. Some and later and. Yeah, you're focused on trying to get another nonprofit. Is it nonprofit? Yeah. Just broadly?
Uh,
No, I think it's what Piedmont, Habitat,
Profit housing.
Urban nonprofit, I've never-
I'll have to check this.
I'll look it up.
It's something.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it's,
and if, well, yeah.
right, it's Piedmont.
Nonprofit service
Habitat, it used to be.
Yeah, well,
And who else?
well, it's not necessarily, like, there is the Charlotte Small Affordable Housing Coalition.
Well, I'm speaking to the original board.
Oh, yes.
It's nonprofit
Executive board.
service provider.
Yeah, the board.
You guys, it's 418 Water Street anywhere, there's no numbers on anything.
Why don't, do you know
What are you
what?
looking for?
The water office.
Across the street.
Oh, yeah.
Process.
Yeah, across the street.
Anything like that little spot right there?
Um,
Sorry to water, but I'm not up and down 5 times.
Yeah, all
it's around.
liaison.
Yeah, nonprofit service provider is the official language. So yeah, there are a few organizations that are definitely represented in the partnership.
But I think, yeah, having homeless would be a critical. Broadly.
Well, maybe it should, you know, it can stay right.
Right.
But that's, yeah, I mean, I guess that's for the consultant. Like how,
Oh,
were we nominated to the larger board for these positions, or are we kind of just?
No, there are several positions that are appointed by the TJPC commission. The other ones were, you know, 3 nonprofits, 1 urban and rural representative.
I mean,
So
I
it was-
remember I was just kind of nominated in the 2 years,
Yes.
just to like,
Yeah.
be this, and I was like, yes.
But I would imagine, like, with the work of the consultant, we would be expanding the full partnership participation, and therefore there would be potentially several
Yeah.
that could serve in the executive committee that have the lens of the homeless services.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, I'm not going anywhere, you know, here's the
Yeah.
term, but yeah, I'll start this conversations.
Thank you. Oh, no, that's me. Sorry, am I supposed to?
So do we need,
Yeah. Any other
do
discussion?
we need a motion?
I think the motion would be to recommend the slate of officers to the full partnership.
Which I'm
And
fine, but
Oh,
you haven't made that motion.
But did you?
Did I say it? No,
Yes, I
no. Okay.
I was definitely about to. I moved that we recommend the officers. Ned as chair and Keith as vice chair.
Any discussion, any further discussion? Oh, all in favor, say aye. Say nay. Any abstention? This wrong going back and forth. Our county work session. You want to go through that one?
sure. So if everyone has an agenda, it's on the last page. So I know that we had brought this up, and hopefully Ned's able to make it while we're talking about this, but I know we brought this up at the last meeting. This was something that he had suggested at the Albemarle Board of Supervisors meeting in sometime in April, early April or March. And essentially, and we kind of looked at that part of the minutes, but essentially the idea is that this would be an in-person work session hosted by the housing partnership to provide input about the Albemarle County Developer Incentive Package. So for some background, I'm sure everyone's sort of aware that the Housing Albemarle plan that was adopted in 2021. Basically, lists a package or set of developer incentives that could induce affordable housing development as they look to do a sort of inclusionary zoning policy for some of their growth areas or parcels in the growth areas. So essentially what this is, we met with Ned to kind of figure out what exactly this would look like and Albemarle staff as well. And so this outline is essentially the bare bones to kind of skeleton of what this would look like. And really what it would be all Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership voting members would be welcome to attend, in addition to a list of stakeholders and participants that the RHP invites. So it'd be open to the public, but would not be there'd be no public comment. It wouldn't be like a regular board meeting where we'd hear testimony from folks. Essentially, it'll be moderated and kind of have 2 1.5 moderated discussion blocks. So we're thinking sometime maybe 1 to 4, 1 to 5 with a small break in between. Essentially what will happen beforehand is staff will we have here solicit input from invited participants and board members. Something very simple to kind of collect the raw material for discussion. So, if we're asking all of the different stakeholders that would be involved in this, what are the top 4 or 5 development incentives that you feel would be necessary to not only develop affordable housing, but preserve your bottom line in so many words. Basically, what would allow you to do this to kind of make the numbers work is kind of the phrase that we used. We basically put that into a meeting packet, a pre-meeting packet that would help not only guide the discussion, but kind of provide information about all the different topics that'll be discovered. Obviously, this isn't expected to be an exhaustive or comprehensive discussion of all, because Albemarle staff has already conducted a lot of research and work on this. It's essentially, bless you, an opportunity for the chair, for Ned Galloway, the chair of the Housing Partnership, and in his role as a board member on the Albemarle Board of Supervisors, to kind of engage directly with some of the stakeholders that would be affected by this policy, and that would be the ones actually, developing the housing or touching on that. We have real estate entitlement professionals, perhaps financing, engineering, and planning professionals, sort of the whole spectrum of folks that would be for-profit and nonprofit organizations that would be affected by this developer incentive package. And essentially afterwards, we compile it into a memo that we provide then to the Albemarle board. And so essentially what we want to talk about today is kind of figure out when we want to have it. There are a few suggestions for places that we've gotten. We have some contacts at, or have reached out and say, hey, is there any space available for the upcoming months? Would this be something you all be able to host? And then really think about who should be invited. Who of these stakeholders or these categories of stakeholders should be represented. And so, I don't know if Christine, if you want to add anything, but
I think it's important to, having met with Albemarle staff and Chair Galloway separately, it's important to consider this within the context of the work that they've been doing around this. And they've done a substantial amount of engagement already. They just want to add additional engagement so that specifically Chair Galloway can be hearing from folks directly rather than having it have to be synthesized from all different directions that staff was receiving that feedback at the county level. And so I think it offers an opportunity for the RHP to be a stakeholder in that discussion, but it's important that the regional body would not be making recommendations on policy, that it would more be providing them information that was discussed for them to then consider as part of policy making, and not the RHP making any recommendations. Welcome, Ned. Anything you want to add to anything you just missed?
So I think that's. Question on that. So can you can you describe the just so we know, but the reason it should not be considered directly
Yeah,
Because we have made recommendations. Right? Like the whole housing
Right.
chapter recommendation, those are recommendations, right? Or did we call it something else?
well, it was regional housing plan that had more of a toolkit of options of what local governments could use, but it wasn't the regional body necessarily saying you should, because we don't, yes.
Okay.
We don't impose that
Yeah,
type of
distinction makes sense. So we can provide
Suggestions.
best practices.
Sure.
and Options, but we are not endorsing a particular.
But I think that's particularly important to note since some of the regional housing partnership is made up of the other 5 jurisdictions, and you wouldn't necessarily be asking Charlottesville or Fluvanna to make recommendations on housing overall policy, but rather bring their technical expertise to have this discussion and then be able to give information back to Albemarle Sport to make the policy.
I think it follows in the spirit of, and we have made our presentations to the other elected bodies, we said. We're not here to tell you what to do. Or even suggest that that's up to you to figure it out. We're here to go. Here's feedback on what we want to do or would like to do. You know, but it's not really meant to be an endorsement or recommendation, it's churn and brainstorm, sounding board, innovation, expertise, it's like that. That makes sense, but I want to go one way to do that. Yeah, that makes sense. It's nuanced distinctions, but no, that makes sense.
Because of the jet engineer.
Yeah, I just turned that off, but I missed that conversation over there.
Yeah, we think that.
You guys are
Did
just
you-
getting
did you
involved.
read it?
Yeah.
it's I was saying that they were similar to the presentations you all have done. They're not dictating what should be done, but that they're feedback, I guess, as opposed to an endorsement or recommendation, official recommendation. Let me say it this way. We are so often, here is the board elected saying this again, dictated to what we should be doing. That I think the RHP is a place for them to come and go, we're already saying what we're going to be doing, let us hear what you think about it. Give us some feedback on that. As opposed to us being a body where we're gonna go out and start telling people what to do. If you want us to write a housing policy for it, we can do that. If we want to, we have, we put the big regional policy.
For the record, we're not going around to our local governments and telling them what they should be doing as far as policy.
Right, no, I understand that, I think that's yeah, I'm talking like impact and,
Yes.
advocacy groups come out and tell us what to do. This is a place with an elected body to say, all right, our staff, our board would like some feedback on this. Yeah. And know that you're going to get a level of expertise that already exists at the table that that makes sense.
So does that mean that you're gonna present to the group an array of developer incentives? I thought the issue was you weren't able to decide on the developer incentives.
We haven't seen developers.
Oh, okay, so then you're not gonna present developer incentives, you're gonna ask.
This is a brainstorm work session on what developer incentives could be used to achieve a goal that has been set.
That's what I thought it was, but it sounded a little bit different when you just described it. You're looking for feedback on something you've already decided.
Well, we've done a lot of work, it just hasn't produced those developer incentive yet.
Okay.
So the developer, we've got, this body has got 3 parties that haven't been involved so far. The folks that sit around the table that are the developers, the nonprofits that sit around the table that have a stake in incentives as well, and then the public. The public is very limited in their 3 minutes that they get when they come and talk to us. So this is a perfect place to get that into the mix and let all the 2 years of work being done by staff and our board sit down and go back. Let's have some different folks have a conversation and see how that informs children. And that's my opinion.
Another question.
I don't know what else was discussed, so.
We just started talking about it when you arrived.
I think,
Thank you, that helps.
I think timeline wise. It would be pretty tight to get this in by June. Just with end of fiscal year things going on, even though the June quarterly partnership meeting is already on people's calendars. I think July would be the timeframe we'd be looking at in order for Albemarle staff and board to then have time to workshop this. You guys planning on a work session on this specifically?
So let's say this didn't come to the RHP, the normal timeline would have been. At some point, our board would have said yes. To a package of incentives, then that would have been put into a work session of our planning commission and our board. Then it would go to the planning commission and then it would go back to the board. So that process, this just becomes another step to continue in that process. So I think it would be awesome if we take what staff has done, the work that the RHP will do, that gets bottled up, packaged together, then the planning commission and the board receives that information, and then from there, hopefully, it just continues through the process and can be approved. It's how we always on delay until it's cases we have. With at least some of the major targets.
And then the other bullet that was on here for discussion, Ned, you had said that it would be all of the members, all the voting members of the partnership would be invited, but that they could then invite folks to participate, that stakeholders that they believe should be at the table during that discussion.
I mean, I think that, you know, this isn't like the committees that we did. No, this is all my opinion stuff, guys. So, you know, part of this is a little bit interesting because I'm obviously from Albemarle, who's making this piece, but you know, like Council Payne at the TJPC earlier this month said, oh, well, Charlottesville might be interested in doing something like this with the RHP. And I think, you know, Supervisor Rutherford and Nelson was shaking his head around the idea of, you know, how this could be useful to their locality as well. So this gives us a chance to kind of figure out how to do this sort of thing.
That's great.
But you know, I'm also not trying to be the one crafting it and doing, you know, I'm looking forward to being a participant in this. Versus the chair of the meeting, yeah. So Keith as the vice chair will have that responsibility.
Some initial thoughts, group dynamics, 5 in a group, I think matters. And if you start with 21, that's probably the maximum size in my view that it should be. And my gut says that a lot of the 21 probably won't feel that they are appropriate or need to attend.
Right.
Yes.
And I can right off the top of my head think of a dozen people that should be at the table that aren't board members. So I think in an effort to get a workable size for some facilitator to try to manage and have a meaningful output. The idea of saying 21 plus another dozen is probably not the right invitation approach.
We discussed that we didn't anticipate all 21 voting members participating.
Yeah, I didn't think you stated on the committee, so it's like, I should have said, nobody's gonna be voluntold here.
Right.
Literally, if interested, the partnership, of course, is there.
I think soliciting which of the 21 would like to have input is a good starting point, and I think in fairness that anyone that feels that they have valuable input from the partnership should be amongst the couple of dozen that should be participating.
Now, I will say is that there are developers in particular that who this whole time have been giving input to our board, who would like to give input, but don't necessarily want to be sitting at the table. So the idea of case studies or white papers on this topic can be collected and shared. Just because you can participate without needing to be actively at the table in person. And, you know, I would think anybody who's looking at a public meeting can attend.
Right. And there are developers out there not on our board that would make sense to be at this table. I mean, we do have William Park, who I think is a key to all of this, that's recently joined the board, that is an active developer that uses incentives to create housing a lot. We also have Piedmont and Habitat that are developers that rely heavily on incentives to make things happen. So we do have people on the board that are excellent at it, but there are attorneys and developers and other people that understand the economics of what it is that we do. That I think we should try to create a list of who they might be. I'm happy to sit in on a work session that does that, or submit names or something.
Yeah,
Have some conversations around that. But I think this is fabulous, and is it enough of a generic discussion that other jurisdictions could attend, listen in, or is it going, I wonder if it's so specific in the input based on where you are and the directions you're heading in the county. You know, for example, could Mr. Payne benefit from hearing the discussion, and is there things that the discussion that would be unique to Albemarle County? And I suspect the answer is yes. But even if the answer is yes, you know, if it's in a public setting, there could be real value in some of the other jurisdictions, particularly the city.
yeah. Well, also, you know, jurisdictions that have growth area or distinct areas, I think would totally learn something from this, because I think the risk is that if you make it too hard to develop, people just develop somewhere else, right? Where if you're whereas the I agree with you, the city I think can definitely benefit from this conversation too, but you know, it's so much less land. And it's all, you know,
Which makes it more challenging.
yeah, exactly.
So
the
some
answer
of the incentives that the county can offer would look very different than what the city could do.
Right.
So answering my own question, yes, it's unique to the county, or more unique to the county and other counties than the city.
Perhaps.
So the focus will be out of Long County. And it will be very interesting for the other jurisdictions.
Well, and it'll feed into the work of the strategic plan where we talk about building out toolkits
Yes.
and best practices and model ordinances or model, case studies that can be used by other jurisdictions.
Is the plan for, it says moderated discussion blocks? We have an idea of who would be best moderating, is it just be staff or what do you all think?
Keith was super brainstorming the idea.
Keith,
I forgot it. We did, depending on the size. You might be breakouts or something like that. It just depends on, some how many people would be there, but. That, I mean, look, we're not trying to add expense to. Do a lot of this either, there'll be an expense probably for space. But if we're able to, the RHP has the skill set included, not to say that it would always be the chair or vice chair, there would be somebody else to moderate it. The city of Charlottesville comes back, but the more it can be in-house at low cost, I think the bigger value that is from people. Absolutely.
I only bring it up, maybe it's either a pro or a potential con, but Keith B, he's kind of a developer, or part of locally developers.
He would say the cure of
Well, he's the chair of the land trust.
The land trust is, misplayer.
And so that's both a pro and maybe viewed as potentially I don't know, I just want to bring it up. We talked about this before, I forgot. I know this is all kind of very familiar, so.
I think
Recovering.
Yeah.
That is the.
I think it would be great,
he would not be representing the plan.
Right.
Right.
He's here.
Well, and somebody with the land trust perspective would be useful. I think.
Certainly.
Which does a good for that.
Good.
Good.
Excellent.
So I guess the main questions, the process by which we invite stakeholders, now that we're not using the June meeting to actually have this, it felt it felt appropriate to staff at least to present this to the full partnership, if we're obviously going to ask partnership members to attend. I don't know. I guess we need to decide sort of how we want to go about, whittling down a list of who should be invited, or what that process looks like. And then also, do we, does staff sort of get, quotes for event spaces, dates that, the ones that we had in mind were the Carr Hillsdale Conference Center, and the North Fork Research Park, which we used for the strategic planning session. Those were the two that we've at least engaged with staff there saying, hey, is this available throughout the summer, during the day? And the answer is generally yes. So it's
not 20 people in a square.
Exactly. Yeah. And, they can configure it in different ways.
The audience.
What?
Because
That's a question.
2 dozen people in a rectangle in this room fits. But the audience wouldn't.
Right.
Talk about low budget.
Sure.
I think in the spirit of other RHP events too. When we started talking about like the structure, what the time would look like, is there would be a time where those who are there viewing weren't necessarily at the table, that we build in a networking setting in the spirit of what's work.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's a great at the conference.
That would be fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the people.
Yeah. So
You need a space that's open. If you needed to do breakouts to accommodate that, but then also have like a work, it's got the big hallway out probably.
Yeah. And there's a patio,
Saying that car, and they've got a separate room in an outdoor area that would allow, now you can, people at the table can mingle with those who are participating and share ideas, cross ideas, that. Kind of get that synergy on. Like, that was a good idea.
Yeah.
That is-
Are the 2 1.5 hour blocks different topics or the same?
That depends. So one way we thought about structuring it that ultimately might not be sort of even in terms of, because there's homeownership, there's incentives to develop homeownership units, there's incentives to develop rental units. We've kind of, in our initial research, found that there's significantly more to do with rental than there is with homeownership. So we probably would, if what we were thinking, at least in our conversations, were, soliciting, let's say we get 8 or 10 incentives that are commonly, suggested in this pre-event survey, just breaking them out into, 5 and 5 and trying to be as thoughtful as we can be in terms of what are related, what would make sense to flow from one into another. But also ensuring that, there is a somewhat not tight schedule, but, that we're reserving time to talk about each and not letting one sort of take over the whole hour and a half. So that's not a very good answer to your question, but
Structure wise, or depending on how many people you have invited.
Right.
You run the same topics simultaneously and then.
Sure.
That is one thing, yes.
that's
Yeah.
certainly an option.
I think what's important to us as PJPDC staff is it's not just an hour and a half of just talking without guiding questions, without making sure we're getting a way to synthesize at the end what the topics were. We don't want to just kind of like spiral all over the place. There has to be some sort of structure that says for this first 20 minutes, we're going to discuss density bonuses and, expedited permits. For this part, we're going to discuss these topics to kind of keep the conversation focused and not go way too far into like this big wild daydreaming. And this is just me talking. This certainly can be amended by you all as saying what you think is the best approach.
Well, if you could provide an effective way to catch people's attention to give some helpful input in advance, then that could be very efficient and effective. And there's a huge amount of research been done. I mean, people like Dr. Petty and so on are at this stage well versed in the subject, to say the least, I'm sure. To start on this, such as that, on which it could be built. If you break into 2 sessions, that suddenly is too facilitated.
Right.
It's anything. I'm sure he can answer that.
All right, any more discussion on this topic? You need anything else?
Well, deciding for who should be invited. Is that something that we want to collect from you all after this meeting and then present? I guess I just want to make sure that staff has an idea of how we want to present.
Let me throw out one idea. Would it make sense to put a memo to the individual
Yep.
board members saying, this is going to happen? Is this something that you would personally like to attend?
Yes, absolutely, and I think it's two questions. One, would you be interested in attending and engaging in this? And two, do you have recommendations on other people that would add value to that discussion that we can consider an invitation?
Okay.
And that way you get to winnow down the 21, I bet you have. I might be wrong. Now, it needs to be worded in such a way to not just get curious people to say, yeah, I'd love to hear this.
Yeah.
Make it clear there is an audience, but be
Sure.
an active participant.
Some
That's the
expertise.
key.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's not just.
out of
Yeah.
the board members, we're looking for those of you that feel appropriate to be active participants in the discussion. And then the second question, who might you suggest should also be advocated?
Mhm.
Um,
And I guess, yeah, I think that sounds great. I think one way to make that easier also is to kind of, from this meeting, staff can kind of decide, I don't want to unilaterally decide when it'll be, but it's easier to ask someone, would you be interested in participating in this thing on this date from this time here?
I think that's a pretty pragmatic
Great.
kind of thing that you guys facilitate all the time. I think you
Okay.
gotta tell us when we can do it. Is the middle of the summer the best time to do it? No. Is it likely to be the time that it gets done? Probably, right?
Correct.
Precisely.
Yeah, this is.
Or that was our exact conversation.
No.
And how does that work with the county's timetable in terms of getting input? Sooner the better. And you gotta have enough time to plan.
I think it's nothing was going to happen over the summer. On our end, probably anybody.
Okay. So if we did it during the summer, that would be good. And if it can be done in the next few weeks.
Yeah, part of it is just getting, once this is kind of scheduled, and we've all thought that maybe once this is enough, we might need a part two. But we won't really know that until part one's done. I don't think it'll go to a part two, because I think it'll be focused enough that it'll do what it's designed to do. But once it's scheduled, then we'll be able to start talking about the schedule mechanism to figure out the rest of it.
Well, a possible part two could be a committee of the board that could help you guys if it's necessary to package it.
Sure.
Mhm.
Appreciate that.
Well, you guys have done a great job.
And when you ask for participants, I think it will be okay to say written, asking for that white paper.
Right. Written testimony or whatever.
Just, well, here's what I think. Say that have it in by this time, so that it can be shared with those all at a time. It'll be reading material, it'll be like a packet that you would have ahead of it.
As a part of that initial memo that you're talking about?
Ask people that a participation would be accepted through a written, and define it, like
Ooh.
1 page white paper on an incentive or something like that. I received, the reason I keep going to that is because I received them from developers. They're like, written, man, that's great. In a couple of paragraphs of email, they clearly don't have the time to be giving me a 20-page dissertation. So it's getting right to the point, and the more of that kind of stuff that could be available, that suits somebody's interest versus necessarily feeling like they have to sit at the table and say.
Then provide that out in advance of the meeting. So
Yep.
people can understand it and we can discuss it more. And
Did you get that?
Yeah.
So like Stacy and the county staff, their lift will be, they'll have to do some sort of summary so that people understand where we're at and what's been done. And I would hope that's pre-material, not presentation material. Stacy, I would imagine, would be there and available to answer questions as needed, but really the idea is here is to Let them back off and see what happens with the conversation.
Not to put you on the spot, Ned, but in our previous discussion, you said it might be valuable to have staff there to do a 5-minute overview. Are you suggesting now that that's done in advance, in a written form?
Five-minute overview is just here's what's happened, timeline, and
So still doing that in
I
person.
think we could do that. I think the bulk of it. You know, Stacy certainly has PowerPoints on this that would get the job done for somebody to look at and understand where we're at. And most of the people are gonna want to sit at the table and follow us, know what's happening anyway.
I don't have anything on my questions. Anything else on that topic? Anybody wants
So
to add?
you know, you have received developer input. So you have some names that you could add to the invitation list.
Yeah, just the normal course of the way this has been going, we've been getting a lot of feedback. And frankly, there have been two, I don't see why I can't share this publicly, there's two individuals that have been all the time engaged in Paul Valerie Long and Neil Williamson. And Neil Williamson, you know, he's a, I mean, the media, whatever, you know, he falls into a couple different pieces, but
He's a lot.
but those two have been in the room in every conversation, so that institutional.
And Neil does his homework with his membership.
And Valerie certainly represents him.
Values is different than
Different developer, so me personally, I've asked the two of them to.
yeah. Valerie was the first name I was going to put forward. For those who don't know, she's something interesting.
And then, yeah, I mean, there are developers, I think that are talking amongst themselves that would be satisfied that like a Valerie's there. There will be some that'll want to be, that'll be here, and then I know that there are some that'll be like, I'm fine, just waiting you later.
Or doing it through Neil or Valerie or something like that, yeah. Okay,
So as a providing in advance of that session, certainly we will have an agenda with the topics. We will provide a copy of Housing Albemarle so that everybody is familiar with the policy and the goals that are being set. And then any handouts or one pagers or anything that are submitted to us for the RHP to consider in advance.
And the ordinance to be couldn't pass the ordinance.
Great. Anything else on that one?
folks. DC. Comes to mind, for example, that have been doing this for years. You know, they consider being at the table. We did that with Arlington at the summit.
Yeah.
Which was a revelatory session. You did what?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to get her back and say that.
I mean, it could be, I think. Not limiting it to just local. Organizations or companies, but I think the idea initially, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ned, was that these are the people who would be directly. Working within the confines of a plan of a developer, or, whatever, inclusionary zoning / developer incentive package, so it makes sense to. I know one of your main concerns was kind of. It's not something you can just do, in a meeting necessarily, but like talking about how it pencils, like talking about the real.
Oh, that's sorry.
Yeah, the pro forma and that, but that's not, I mean, certainly we could ask if there's.
I don't know if it's necessary. I mean, if you find the right developers.
Sure.
That are working in other distributors.
Sure.
Then you've got it. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of developers that say there's a lot of incentives up there that just don't work and.
Right.
Never get used. That sound good. I think the city has some. In draft form right now.
Yep.
That's probably. Or there will be some developers that might be willing to suggest that. It's a very tricky subject. It's,
I'm personally, very involved. If you had this, I would.
yeah, this is what I think we're all about.
Yeah, I think it's.
So we'll have, you know, I think we'll conduct the work that you guys kind of have described before the June partnership meeting and kind of put it before the board and say, these are the names that we've received. This is where we're hoping to have it, or where it will be rather. You know, here are the RHP members that have said they'd be interested in coming. That's how basically, you know, kind of present it before them, just so everyone has an opportunity to engage with it, even though we'll have reached out to folks beforehand, just so we can. And I think that's good to have it be done publicly too. But does that sound all right to everyone?
Yeah, as long as you reach out soon.
We'll do all that prior.
Yeah.
For sure.
For that meeting.
Yeah, and we'll start getting on scheduling it.
All right.
Cool, thank you.
We'll start making phone calls to see space availability and dates and times. And to bring that.
Yep.
Detail back to the board. Now that you're here, Chair.
You're the chair now.
Yeah, go ahead.
You were to the round table,
Where we were at.
we're all the way at the end, round table and then adjourn.
That's two favorite parts of the meeting.
Remember, go in a circle.
I don't have that date. Anybody have any questions?
Why? That was.
I have a question.
Okay.
And you might know that, I know there's the parcel of land that was acquired by the, yeah, is it just, I don't know how intimately involved you are in that, but I know that housing was an option potentially, so I'm just,
Right. They're still working on a master plan. for
Okay.
that, and I actually do not know the status. They don't only get kind of where Jack did that whole thing and getting things fixed out.
okay,
Their primary goal is that it's gonna be something correct. We need fields desperately. I mean, we have a lot of things to do fun for adults, but not too much for kids. So that's fields is a big deal. Some kind of infrastructure for that. We always have had infrastructure problems and also lack of water and septic and things like that. So that's a consideration. They're in the middle of their strategic plan and also considering some zoning ordinance changes. That we'll see. They didn't invite me to go off the property. Well,
How would NCCDF? Any fun stuff going on?
just the regular things we're wrapping up our year, working with the housing consortium to make sure we spend all our money this year and try to get as much money for next year, all that good stuff. And we're doing the vouchers forever and ever and amen, it's constant things, so that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to start as many new things as possible without diluting what we've got to get done, so.
Well, we are getting really close to making a public announcement on our affordable housing sites. Probably within 3 weeks. I think we're meeting this week, so I can pass that.
What about the third second?
What's that?
What about the timing on the third?
Well, we're waiting on the county for that.
Yeah.
We need to rezoning before.
If I asked the question out loud.
So, yeah, we're excited about it.
That is exciting.
Can I ask a question? Once you decide on the site, what do you think the timing is gonna be to something with the balloons on these sites? Is it years? 5 years, 10 years?
No, not that long.
Okay.
I don't know, we've already been in this for 2 years.
Yeah. You are.
Well, I'd say, so this would be the developer selection, we already know what the sites are. Okay. The Workland and 10th Street site and the Piedmont site. And I would guess it's at least a year to negotiate, you know, the agreement and get everything lined up and whatever, and then it's probably at least a couple plus years if we do something, or so I read something, yeah.
I'll be curious to see if they're basing their approach on the proposed new zone, presumably.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then part of the timing will be needing that new zoning to be in place. There's a lot of people looking at a lot of sites now in the city, for example,
That's a city, yeah,
that
cities.
look like they might be eligible for increased opportunities. But those opportunities don't materialize till the zoning is final.
Yeah, that would be the only tender Workland site.
But, which is, the zoning, I didn't look specifically at what's proposed there, but I think it's beneficial that it's the new zone.
Cool. Well, overall, finalized the budget earlier in May. We had our tax rate, we did not equalize down. The property tax, we did not equalize up the real property, personal property vehicle taxes. So we decided that the car values, while they were declining, were not declining at the same pace that they jumped. They still remain high. So when you think equalized, of course, everybody said, well, it's equalized. The personal property down, which is the homes, your house and land. But the equalized for the car, we would have had to increase the rate.
Right.
So we forward some revenue from that again, that was probably $5 million, keep that where it was at. The thing that I said, even about keeping the rate where it was at, we looked 5 years ago at our strategic plan, our 5-year financial plan. The revenues that we were seeing under 2 strategic plans ago were calling for tax rate increases. So had property values not climbed, and we have not made a tax rate increase since this is my 6th year. I voted for a tax increase once, and that tax rate increase had a voter bond referendum behind it for the referendum for the school money. So that was a high majority approval by the voters to do that tax rate increase. But the point being is that the revenue that we're seeing coming in, while folks obviously saw the property assessments go up to create that revenue, had the rates not gone up, probably would have been still putting that revenue forward for us to achieve a strategic plan. But the current budget does not, in my opinion, do a lot of fluff. In addition to what we've been trying to accomplish, the residents have said that they would like to see 2 elementary schools are in there. One was southern Peter Pattern, one in the north. Some investments in economic development, which today's announcement should give some reason why we're planning for that, but also buffered into this budget is the idea that the property assessments are not going to continue this pace. And some of what they're going to go down. Indicators is next year that could be a time frame when that happens. And if you did not build in sufficient relative to the current revenue and started covering all these costs, and then that happens next year, we can't cover what we put into play. So then what would we do? Come out and raise your taxes. So trying to do the planning in a way with the current revenues to say, all right, let's plan for when that starts to come back so that we can continue with where we're at and not have to do any drastic either cuts or raises then. So I think that was a very smart approach by our budget team, the county executive's direction. So the board was unanimous in voting to that budget. The last meeting when we talked about our ADU, the new area median income is what the state's report, 123,000, I think it was. And that's an 11% increase year over year. But that,
That's for the Charlotte, but
Yep.
120. Year in median income. So when we're talking 80%, 60% is
easier.
a big increase. But that was what was reported when we were talking. We did pass our affordable dwelling unit ordinance, which basically is state enabling authority that we needed to do that ordinance to then do loans or grants. That are out there. Incentives will break fall under a different category, in my opinion. And then today's announcement was a big deal for Project Enable and for our economic development plan in the county. But we just the board just voted to acquire 462 acres around the bank station. That worth for $58 million. So that just got kicked off, and I left they're doing the presser over there. So I proposed and
You gotta run out.
hit the eject button. Yeah,
I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
so you'll be hearing, if you're interested in that, you can go back and watch or listen in to what the county executive and the economic development team gave a presentation for prior to our vote today. It gives an idea of what that could look like. Obviously, there'll be implications in terms of partnerships, both at the federal, state level, local level, et cetera. But this is, we've done a lot of economic development activity in the last 6 years, but this is a big one for all of our county in that regard. So I'm really proud of our team to work on this to acquire that property to keep the work that's going on with the station now solidified and then can expand. That at the end of the day, that's what it's going to take to get the revenue pressure off of people's property taxes, is to start generating into revenue in a different way. And while I'm always appreciative of employers that bring 15 and 20 jobs into the community town, doing it at this scale is a whole different ballgame when it comes to how it impact it. Good stuff.
Is that defense intelligence?
It's we purchased the site, and obviously, yes, the idea, we just received our the military or the defense industry economic report. It's not the name of it, 2 weeks ago, and I'm on. As you know, the current statuses of what impact they have. But this would allow them to, we got site control, which is important for a lot of reasons. And then the vertical development will be left to those who are partner. It could be federal, it could be state, it could be private, local, et cetera. Congratulations. So that's this was a big for us. Economic development. Excited, because 6 years ago, economic development was still a curse word now.
That whole sector after the university and the hospital is way up there.
Employment, but then also the impacts it has here.
Yeah,
I would definitely say this is a bad, I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact name of the report. Might be something you guys share or could share out, but it goes to the what's the committee currently and is the
defense, the DAC.
DAC. So that they're in the Wealth Computer Center did the report. That talks about the economic impact, and that's previous. That's just the current impact, so this will, that can start to multiply. You can grow that.
Defense Affairs Committee.
What's the chambers? Well, module 3, the final module of the draft, something just came out. I just.
Oh,
People did.
oh, wow.
So it's available online to review. So that's all 3 modules. Asking for comments by June 18th. Which is encouraging. It's still moving forward in a very positive direction. And as I was just saying indirectly, based on our conversation about the university properties, there is it is already generating interest in properties that will benefit from appreciation, benefit from increased zoning density. which should have a direct impact on affordable housing. Um, So how to measure that in any reasonable timeframe, I don't begin to understand. So it'll be a very interesting roundtable to hear how people feel about incentives, because the cities looking at the same issues. But that's very encouraging, and you know, along with the county's serious moving forward on this subject, it's a very healthy environment. I'm glad our taxes aren't going up. And our houses are appreciating it in a speed. Unbelievable. Amount in the county right now. It's just, I mean, the national average is dropping, but the house values in the county and the city are just under control. So affordability is just getting further and further out of reach. My place has gone up 20%. Well, we're thinking, if I wanted to sell, you're gonna buy.
Get right. That's-
Yeah,
a lot of people that want-
Yeah, I have folks still talking about, oh, some of the prices are putting down, yeah, the values are. People are paying a little less, they're paying a little less.
A little less than
they should
the less than the 25% that's gone up in the last year. Yeah, it's very frightening for lots of reasons, including economic development. I'm sure trying to get employers to come in, and one of the first questions they ask is, you know, where are my employees going? That's not a good business model.
And it's definitely out in the, you know, in the rural areas too, when you have nothing to rent. Nothing to buy.
When it turns over, it goes up.
And the, you know, we have the teachers have to live in Lynchburg and Stanton, and the emergency workers live in Stanton, you know, there's 60-minute drives
Yeah.
to come for their shift, so it's really.
Yeah, I think fair market rent for one bedroom in Lynchburg's 700, 800, something like that.
But it's creeping up, so the
Which is
rents,
That's.
everybody can put it at 14, they're putting it at 14. And so, and it's getting, you know, some of the people are only people, then it's can go up every year, so they're still renting for $500 the drift, and then, you know, families are, and there's this such a huge disparity. I don't know if it's everywhere, because I know it's now somewhere. People that can afford $400,000 for a house. And then there's the other people. And people always talk about the other people, but they, you know, it's such an ill-defined group. I really need to kind of nail that down. Because some people say, well, you know, we have for the on the school board, we have whatever the population is, kind of determines how much the state pays and how much the locality pays, or is it very high when we come to needs and changes. What did you say?
Positive.
Positive stuff, right? And so, it's based on housing, right? So what's our ability to pay? But then there are people who say we don't have the ability to pay, that's, you can't raise taxes, because people can't afford the taxes, but we have really rate compared to everywhere else, you know, they can spend $100,000 an hour. It's, so I would kind of feel that. To figure out who are the people that can't afford to pay their taxes. I know who they are, I work with them. But they're not good at everything else. Pretty, I'm sure.
Well, wanted to share with you all that we technically reached functional zero of veteran homelessness.
Wow.
A couple weeks ago, so it's pretty historic, which means there's 3 or fewer, doesn't mean there's 0.
3 or fewer veterans experiencing homelessness in our area at any point in time. But it's still a huge accomplishment, and we need to maintain it now, which does not mean the work is done. In many ways, it's just begun to maintain this number, but it still represents a really significant accomplishment by the teams focusing on veteran homelessness. So even in a housing constrained market, having focused case conferencing, collaborations between service providers, and an abundance of rental assistance, and it works. We used to have 25-ish at any point in time. Veterans experiencing homelessness in the area. So from that down to 3 is pretty amazing. Once we maintain for a little while, we'll do a public announcement to talk more about it, and specifically to hopefully to highlight that it's not a mystery how to actually solve this issue. It's just we need to scale up resources for other target populations in a similar way than what we did with veterans. So it's pretty cool, pretty exciting. And then also I wanted to share with you all, I shared with most of you that I will be leaving my position at RAC at the end of September. And it's been an honor and a pleasure to serve on the board and on the executive committee with you all. Work on some many of the projects that I've gotten a chance to work on. It's been a highlight of my career. So yeah, I'm not moving anywhere soon. I'm not moving out of the community either. But at the end of September. So anyways, and also to express my gratitude for all the work you want.
Well, thank you. Thank you. What numbers are you using for the overall list?
Right now, there's the whole population of our by name list, or the number of people at this point in time experiencing homelessness is 158. And again, that's who we're aware of. We're likely missing many people who are potentially in dilapidated homes and more rural communities. I would use that 158 to really be best described as people in Charlottesville and Albemarle area, because those were programs, shelter programs. And I have to head off to the meetings. Thank you.
Well, it's not been enjoyable, you know, see. Sure, it's good for you, so that's what always, what I have to be reminded of. I appreciate that. It's definitely, I have touted my respect for you in a couple of different public meetings, so I hope somebody will be able to take the time and do the work that you've done. Thank you so much. It's a lot of. Okay.
With that, let's close the meeting. Yep.
Adjourned. Without objection.